It wasn't supposed to be anything important, just a normal evening, like so many others before it. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels familiar, not empty. I was in the kitchen, finishing up, moving slowly, not in a rush to do anything. He had gone upstairs a few minutes earlier, saying he needed to take a quick shower before settling in for the night. Everything felt routine, predictable, safe. I remember thinking how ordinary the moment was, and maybe that's why what happened next felt so out of place. His phone was on the table. That alone wasn't unusual. He left it around all the time, never protective over it, never secretive. At least, that's what I believed. I wiped my hands and glanced at it without really thinking. Then it lit up. A call. I looked at the screen. No name, just a number. For a second, I hesitated. Not because I thought anything was wrong. Just instinct. You know how sometimes you pause before doing something simple, even when there's no reason to? That's what it felt like. Then I picked it up. Hello? I said it naturally, calm, expecting a normal response. But instead of someone speaking to me, I heard his voice, not from upstairs, from the phone, clear, focused. I'll meet you at the hotel, same place. I froze. My grip tightened around the phone, but I didn't say anything, didn't interrupt, didn't breathe properly, because for a second, my mind didn't catch up to what I had just heard. It didn't make sense. Not immediately. So I stayed quiet, listening. There was a pause on the line, then a soft response from the other side. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I heard enough. Enough to know this wasn't a mistake. Then he spoke again, lower this time, more familiar, more certain. Just don't be late this time. Something shifted in my chest. Not fast, not sharp, just heavy, like something slowly settling into place. Still, I didn't speak, because the moment I said something, it would become real, and I wasn't ready for that. Then I heard it, a small sound on the other end, a quiet laugh, soft, but unmistakable. And that's when everything stopped, because I knew that laugh. Not vaguely, not uncertainly. I knew it. I had heard it too many times. Across dinner tables, in conversations, in moments that used to feel safe. It was my sister. My hand went cold. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't say a word, because now there was no confusion left, no space to explain it away, no way to pretend I misunderstood. I stayed on the line just long enough to hear the call end. Then I slowly lowered the phone, placed it back exactly where it had been, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just heard something that didn't belong in my life. The house was still quiet. Nothing had changed, at least not on the outside. Upstairs, I could still hear the faint sound of running water. Everything looked the same, but something wasn't. Because at that moment, without a single argument, without a single confrontation, everything I thought I understood about my life shifted, and I hadn't even said a word yet. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone like it might explain itself if I gave it enough time. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent, ordinary, like nothing had happened. I turned away slowly and leaned against the counter, pressing my hands flat against the surface to steady myself. My mind was already moving, trying to catch up, trying to rearrange what I had just heard into something that made sense. Maybe I heard it wrong. That was the first thought. Quick, immediate, almost automatic. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe the connection was crossed. Maybe. I stopped, because none of those felt real. I had heard his voice, clearly, and I knew my sister's laugh. There was no confusion in that. Still, I tried. I tried to soften it, to make it smaller, because the truth, as it was, didn't fit anywhere in my life. Not in my marriage, not in my family, not in anything I believed was still intact. I pushed myself off the counter and moved slowly through the kitchen, doing things that didn't need to be done, straightening something that was already straight, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, anything to avoid standing still, because standing still meant thinking. And thinking meant replaying it. I'll meet you at the hotel, same place. That line didn't fade. It stayed, clear, unchanged. And the more I replayed it, the less room there was for doubt. Same place. That meant it wasn't the first time. That meant there had been other times. Times I didn't know about. Times I wasn't supposed to know about. I stopped moving, because that thought didn't sit quietly. It grew. It connected to things I had ignored before. Small things, moments that didn't feel important at the time, late nights that didn't have clear explanations, calls that ended quickly when I walked into the room, conversations that felt incomplete. I had noticed them, but I never questioned them, because I trusted him, and I trusted her. That trust had filled in the gaps for me. It made everything seem normal. Now, those same gaps felt different, not empty, hidden. I walked toward the window and looked outside, not really seeing anything, just needing somewhere to place my eyes while everything inside me shifted, because something else had started to settle in. Don't panic, not even anger, clarity, slow, uncomfortable, but steady. This wasn't something that just happened. This wasn't sudden. This had been there. Before tonight, before that phone call, before I ever realized I needed to pay attention. I exhaled slowly and closed my eyes for a second, because another thought had begun to form, one I didn't want, but I couldn't ignore it. How long? That question didn't have an answer yet, but it carried weight, because the longer it has been happening, the more it meant, not just what they did, but what they chose to hide from me. I opened my eyes and looked back toward the table where his phone still rested. Everything about it looked normal, but now I know better. I walked over and stood near it again, not touching it, just looking, because a part of me wanted to check, to confirm, to find something clear, something undeniable. But another part of me held back, because once I saw it, there would be no space left for doubt at all. And even though doubt was uncomfortable, it was still easier than certainty. Upstairs, the water stopped. That sound pulled me back immediately, back into the moment, back into the house, back into reality. because he was still here, walking around, moving like everything was the same, like nothing had changed. But something had. I straightened slightly and stepped away from the table. Not rushed, not panicking, just aware. Because now I understood something I didn't before. This wasn't about what I felt. This was about what I knew. And what I knew was only the beginning. I just didn't know yet how much more there was to see. I didn't go upstairs right away. Even though I heard him moving, even though I knew he would come down eventually, I stayed where I was, because I needed a moment to decide who I was going to be when I saw him. Not what I felt, that was already there, but how I would act, because once I looked at him, everything would change, and I wasn't ready to show that yet. So I stayed still, breathing slowly, letting my thoughts settle into something I could control. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Steady, normal, like every other night. And that was the part that felt the most unsettling. Nothing in his world had changed, only mine. He walked into the room, drying his hands, glancing at me like he always did. "Everything okay?" he asked. Casual, unaware. I looked at him, really looked this time, at his face, at his expression, at how easily he stood there. And for a second, I almost said it. I almost asked the question sitting right there in my chest. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready for answers yet, not until I understood more. So I nodded. "Yes," I said. My voice is steady, controlled, and that was the moment something shifted. Not between us, inside me, because I had just chosen something. I had chosen not to confront him. Not yet. Which meant I had also chosen to watch. He picked up his phone from the table, glanced at it briefly, then slipped it into his pocket like nothing about it mattered, like it was just another object, not something that had just changed everything. "I'm going to step out for a bit," he said. Simple, direct, no hesitation. "All right," I replied, and that was it. No questions, no suspicion in my voice, no sign that anything was wrong, because I needed him to believe everything was still the same. He grabbed his keys and walked toward the door, and as it closed behind him, the house went quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel familiar. It felt different, because now I was alone with something real, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I turned slowly and looked toward the door he had just walked out of, then back at the empty space where he had been standing, and that's when I moved. Not quickly, not emotionally, just intentionally. I walked to the chair and sat down. I reached for my own phone and placed it on the table in front of me, because if I was going to understand this, I needed more than what I heard. I needed proof, clear, undeniable. I thought about his phone, about the messages that might be there, about the things I hadn't seen yet, but I knew one thing. If I went looking now, I might find something I wasn't prepared to handle. So instead of rushing, I slowed down, because this wasn't just about catching him. This was about understanding everything, and understanding takes control. I leaned back slightly and stared ahead, letting the silence settle without letting it take over, because now I wasn't reacting anymore. I was thinking, connecting, planning. That one call had cracked something open, but it wasn't the full picture. Not yet. and I wasn't going to confront a piece of the truth. I was going to see all of it, from the beginning to the end, because whatever this was, it didn't start tonight, and I was done being the last one to know. I didn't follow him that night, even though the thought crossed my mind more than once. It would have been easy. Get in the car, keep a distance, see for myself. But I didn't move, because something in me understood this wasn't just about catching a moment, it was about understanding a pattern. And patterns don't reveal themselves in one night, they show themselves over time. So I stayed, sat there in the quiet, letting everything slow down instead of speeding up, because rushing would have made it emotional, and I needed to stay clear. The next morning, everything looked normal. That was the first thing I noticed. The routine hadn't changed. He moved the same way, spoke the same way, sat across from me like he always did. If I hadn't heard that call, I would have believed nothing was wrong, and that realization stayed with me, because it meant one thing. Whatever this was, he had gotten comfortable with it, comfortable enough to live inside it without slipping. I watched him carefully, not obvious, not questioning, just observing. The small things started to stand out. The way he checked his phone more often, the way he angled the screen slightly away, the way his tone shifted when certain messages came through. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. But once you see something, you don't miss it again. Later that day, I saw my sister. It wasn't planned. Just one of those normal moments that used to feel simple. She greeted me the same way she always did, smiled, spoke casually, like nothing had changed. And I stood there, looking at her, listening to her voice, watching her expression, and all I could think about was that laugh. That same laugh I had heard on the phone. Soft, familiar. Now it sounded different. Not because it changed, because I had. Everything all right? She asked. There was a slight pause in her tone. Not obvious, but enough. I nodded. Yes, I said. And again, I chose silence, because I wanted to see how far this went, how natural they could both act, how long they had been doing it. We talked for a few minutes. Normal conversation, simple words, but underneath it, there was something else, something unspoken, and I could feel it, not from her words, from the way she avoided certain moments, from the way her eyes didn't stay too long, from the way she seemed careful, careful not to reveal something she didn't even know I had already seen. I left that conversation with more clarity than before. No answers, but confirmation. This wasn't one mistake. This wasn't something recent. This had been happening, quietly, comfortably, right in front of me, and I had missed it. Or maybe I had chosen not to see it. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else, because it meant I wasn't just dealing with what they did. I was also facing what I had ignored. That evening, I sat in the same place as the night before, the same chair, the same room, but I wasn't the same person sitting there, because now I wasn't trying to figure out if something was wrong. I already knew. Now I was watching, not for proof anymore, for confirmation, for consistency, for truth, because every small action, every glance, every moment they thought was unnoticed, was telling me something, and piece by piece, it was becoming clearer. This wasn't something I was going to confront blindly. I was going to confront it completely. Because when I finally spoke, there wouldn't be anything left for them to deny. That night, I didn't turn on the television, didn't reach for my phone. I didn't try to distract myself. I just sat there in the quiet, because once everything slows down, that's when the memories start coming back. Not the big ones, the small ones, the ones you didn't question at the time, the ones that felt normal. Until now, I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes settle on nothing in particular. And that's when it started. Moments, simple moments, the kind you don't hold on to because they don't seem important. I remembered the way my sister used to stop by unannounced. Not unusual. She had always been that way. Comfortable, familiar, part of my space. I never questioned it. Why would I? She was my sister. I remembered the way he would greet her. Warm, easy, natural. Nothing about it ever felt out of place. Not then. But now, those same moments felt different. I could see them more clearly. The way conversations would continue just a little longer than necessary. The way they would laugh at things I didn't fully catch. The way I would step out of the room and come back to a silence that felt slightly too quick. I had noticed those things. I just never gave them meaning, because trust fills in the gaps. It makes everything make sense, even when it shouldn't. I closed my eyes briefly, because another memory surfaced, one that felt sharper than the rest. A family dinner. Nothing special about it. Just us, sitting around the table, talking, eating. Everything felt normal. But now I could see it differently. The way she looked at him when she thought no one noticed. The way he responded without looking directly at her. Subtle, careful, almost practiced. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it meant everything. I opened my eyes and sat up slightly, because the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This didn't start recently. This didn't begin with that phone call. That call was just the first time I heard it, but it had been there long before that, building quietly, moment by moment, right in front of me. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window. The night outside was still, calm, unchanged, but inside, everything had shifted, because now I wasn't just dealing with what I had heard. I was seeing everything I had missed. Every moment I had trusted without question. Every time I chose comfort over curiosity. And that realization didn't come with anger. It came with something else. Clarity, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that settles in slowly and stays. Because once you start seeing the truth in the past, you can't go back to how it felt before. I placed my hand lightly against the glass and looked out into the distance. And one thought stayed with me more than anything else. They didn't just betray me in a moment. They did it over time, quietly, carefully, and now I was finally seeing it, not as pieces, but as a whole. And once you see something whole, you stop questioning if it's real. You start deciding what to do about it. I lowered my hand and stepped back, because one thing had become clear. This wasn't something I was going to react to. This was something I was going to finish. Completely. Because whatever they thought I didn't know, whatever they believed I would never see, was already in front of me, and I wasn't going to look away anymore. By the next morning, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't trying to explain anything away. I was clear, not about every detail, but about one thing that mattered. I needed the truth, not pieces of it, not assumptions, the whole thing, and I wasn't going to get that by sitting still. I stood in the kitchen, the same place where everything had shifted the night before, and looked around like I was seeing it for the first time. Nothing had changed, but I had, because now I wasn't moving through my day on habit. I was paying attention, every movement, every word, every silence. When he came downstairs, I didn't look at him right away. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't need to. I could already feel it. The same calm energy, the same routine, the same version of him that had existed before I knew anything. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. Simple, even. Nothing in my voice gave anything away. He moved around the kitchen, picked up his phone, checked it briefly, then set it down again. That one small action told me more than anything he could have said, because now I noticed it. The way he stayed aware of it, the way it never left his reach for long. Before, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Now, I saw everything. I poured my coffee slowly and sat down across from him, not watching directly, just a present, because I wasn't trying to catch him. I was letting him show me, and he did, in small ways, the kind of ways you only notice when you're no longer distracted by trust. A message came through. He didn't open it immediately. That was new. He waited, counted a few seconds, then checked it casually, like it didn't matter. But it did, because everything about it was controlled, measured, intentional. I took a sip of my coffee and set the cup down carefully, because that was the moment I made the decision, not emotional, not rushed, clear. I wasn't going to confront him yet, and I wasn't going to ask questions I already knew he wouldn't answer honestly. I was going to see it for myself, completely. Do you have plans today? I asked. My tone is light, natural. He glanced up briefly. Just a few things, he said. Nothing specific, nothing detailed. That was enough, because now I know he wasn't going to offer information, which meant I would have to find it. I nodded. All right, I said, and left it there, because the less I asked, the more he revealed. After he left the house, I didn't wait. I moved, not quickly, not panicking, just with purpose. I went to the hallway, picked up my keys, and paused for a second, because this was the moment everything shifted again. Not because of what I knew, because of what I was about to do. I wasn't following out of anger. I wasn't chasing a moment. I was confirming the truth. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. The air felt different, sharper, like everything was more defined. I got into my car and sat there for a second, hands resting on the wheel, not hesitating, just grounding myself, because once I started this, there was no going back to not knowing, and I understood that fully. I started the engine and pulled out slowly, keeping enough distance to stay unseen, not guessing where he was going, watching, letting it unfold, because whatever this was, it had a place, a routine, a direction, and I was about to see it for myself, not through words, not through suspicion, but clearly, directly, exactly as it was. And this time, I wasn't going to miss anything. I followed at a distance, not close enough to be noticed, not far enough to lose him, just enough to see where he was going, without becoming part of it. Every turn he made, I matched it, calm, controlled, no sudden movement. Because this wasn't about catching him off guard. This was about seeing the truth exactly as it was. He drove across town, not toward anywhere familiar, not toward anything routine. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because people don't hide things where they're comfortable. They hide them where they think no one is looking. After a few minutes, he slowed down, turned into a parking lot, and then I saw it. The hotel. Simple, quiet, the kind of place people don't ask questions. My hands tightened slightly on the wheel, but I didn't stop. I drove past, keep going, then circled back slowly, parking just far enough to see the entrance. And I waited, not long, because I didn't have to. A few minutes later, she arrived, my sister. Stepping out of her car like this was just another part of her day. No hesitation, no uncertainty. That was the moment everything settled completely, because there was no more guessing left, no more questions, just the truth, clear, unavoidable. I stepped out of the car, closed the door quietly, and walked toward the entrance. Not rushed, not angry, just steady, because I had already felt everything I needed to feel. Now, I was there to finish it. They didn't see me at first. They were standing near the entrance, close enough, familiar, comfortable, like this wasn't new, like this had happened before. And that was the part that stayed with me. Not just what they were doing, but how normal it felt to them. I stopped a few steps away, close enough for them to hear me. Do you always meet here? Or is today special? My voice was calm, even, no tension, just clear. They both turned at the same time, and in that moment, everything changed. The expressions, the posture, the silence, shock, not because of what they were doing, but because I was there, because they didn't expect me. My sister stepped back slightly. His face tightened, and neither of them spoke, not right away. I looked at both of them, not searching, not questioning, just seeing them as they were, because I didn't need explanations. I had already seen enough. You didn't even try to hide it, I said, still calm, still controlled. That landed because it wasn't loud. It was certain. He opened his mouth slightly, like he was about to say something, then stopped, because there wasn't anything to say that would change what was already in front of us. My sister looked at me, then away, then back again, like she was trying to find something to hold on to, something that would make this less real. But there wasn't anything left. Not anymore. I took a small step closer, not aggressively, just enough to remove the distance. I heard the call, I said, and that was it. That was the moment everything became undeniable. No room to deny, no space to explain it away, just the truth, sitting there between all three of us. And for the first time since this started, they had nothing to hide behind. Because I wasn't asking anymore. I already knew. And now, they knew that I knew. For a moment, no one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was nothing left to hide. The air between us felt still, like everything had paused just long enough for the truth to settle where it belonged. I looked at both of them, not searching for answers anymore, just watching what they would do now that there was nowhere left to run. He was the first to move, not forward, not toward me, just a slight shift, like he was trying to find his balance again. "This isn't what you think," he said. The words came out quickly, almost automatically, like something he had said before. And that told me everything, because when something is real, you don't reach for a line, you reach for the truth. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, then at her, because I wanted to see who would hold it. Who would take responsibility for what was already standing in front of us? My sister finally spoke. "It didn't happen the way it looks," she said. Her voice was softer, careful, like she was trying to step around something instead of facing it directly. I nodded slightly, not in agreement, just acknowledging what was being said, because I had expected this. Not honesty, not immediately, excuses, deflection, distance from the truth. "That's interesting," I said calmly, "because it looks exactly like what it is." That shifted something, not loudly, but enough, because now they understood. This wasn't going to be redirected. This wasn't going to be softened. This was going to stay exactly where it was. Clear, unavoidable. He exhaled and ran a hand over his face, like he was trying to reset the moment. "We were going to tell you," he said, and for the first time, something almost felt different. Not because of what he said, because of how late it came. I held his gaze. "Tell me what?" I asked. My voice is steady, not emotional, just direct. He hesitated, and that hesitation stretched just long enough to say everything he wasn't saying. My sister looked at him, waiting, almost expecting him to carry it. But he didn't. So I did. "For how long?" I asked. And that question landed differently, because time changes everything. It turns a mistake into a decision. It turns a moment into a pattern. Neither of them answered right away, and that silence was the answer. I nodded slowly, because I didn't need numbers. I didn't need details. I already understood what mattered. This wasn't recent. This wasn't accidental. This was chosen. Over and over again. And now, standing there in front of me, they were finally facing it. Not what they did, what it meant. I took a small breath and stepped back slightly. Not retreating, just creating space. Because I wasn't there to argue, and I wasn't there to break down. I was there to finish something. "I heard enough," I said. "More than enough." They both watched me closely now, not defensive anymore, not confident, just uncertain, because the moment had shifted. They weren't in control of it anymore. I was. "You didn't just lie to me," I continued. "You built something behind my back and expected me to never see it." That stayed in the air, heavy, but not loud, because truth doesn't need volume. It just needs to be said. My sister's eyes dropped. He didn't speak, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. No defense, no denial, just the weight of it. And in that moment, something inside me settled completely. Not anger, not a shock, clarity. Because now I wasn't wondering anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't trying to understand. I already did. And once you reach that point, you stop asking for anything from anyone else. You decide for yourself, and I already had. I didn't wait for them to say anything else, because there was nothing left that could change what I already knew. No explanation was going to fix it, no apology was going to undo it, and I wasn't standing there for either one. I looked at them one last time, not searching for regret, not waiting for guilt, just seeing them clearly for who they were in that moment, not who I thought they were before. And that difference was everything. I'm not going to argue with you, I said calmly. My voice is steady, even, because this wasn't a moment for emotion anymore. This was a moment for decision. I'm not going to ask you to explain it or fix it. They both stayed silent, listening now, because the control they thought they had was gone. You made your choices, I continued, and now I'm making mine. That landed, not loudly, but deeply, because there was no confusion in it, no space for negotiation, just the truth. I took a small breath and stepped back. Not slowly, not dramatically, just done. And for the first time since this started, I felt it. Not the weight, not the confusion, relief, because I wasn't holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. I wasn't trying to protect something that had already been broken. I wasn't standing in a place that no longer belonged to me. I turned away, not because I couldn't face them, but because I didn't need to anymore. Every answer I needed was already in front of me. And as I walked back toward my car, the air felt different, clear, still, like something had finally settled, not around me, inside me, because I understood something now that I didn't before. They didn't take anything from me at that moment. They showed me what was never truly there to begin with. And that kind of truth doesn't break you, it frees you. I reached my car and paused for a second, my hand resting on the door, not looking back, not questioning anything, just standing in that moment of clarity, because this wasn't an ending I was afraid of. This was an ending I understood. I opened the door and sat down, closing it quietly behind me. And as I started the engine, one thought stayed with me. They didn't lose me when I walked away. They lost me long before that. They just didn't realize it yet. And this time, I wasn't the one left behind. I keep thinking about that moment, not when I heard the call, but when I realized I had been the only one telling the truth in my own life. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't start with one mistake. It builds quietly until you finally see it for what it is. So I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you have confronted them right there, or walked away without saying a word? Be honest. I read every single comment. And if stories like this speak to you, stories about truth, betrayal, and finding your strength when everything changes, subscribe to Quiet Voice of Her Life, because sometimes the quietest stories carry the deepest truths.